Stephen, I think you're still on
There we
mute.
go. Thank you.
There we
Hello.
go.
Welcome to AWS Made Easy, episode number 42. That is exciting. And
Absolutely.
of course, with the classic Douglas Adams reference.
Absolutely.
Do you remember the framing of that one?
I think
Is that they built a supercomputer to
it was
answer life's ultimate question, and it took
correct.
7 million years.
Exactly. It's been a while since I've read Hitchhikers. I need to go back and reread it. It's been well over a decade.
Well, they actually made a movie of it a little while ago. I'll put this little clip on the screen. This is funny.
Of life, the universe, and everything is "42. Yes, I thought it over quite thoroughly. It is, it's 42. It would have been simpler, of
So I
course, to
wonder
have
if
known
that's
what the
going to
actual
be.
question.
Yeah. So if you build a supercomputer and ask it a complicated question with an ill-defined problem space, you might not get an intelligible answer. Which
Now
I
I
think
really wonder what ChatGPT says is
that's
the answer to life.
that's exactly what I was thinking. Oh, how have you been? How's your weekend? How's everything?
It's been fabulous. We had our very close friends over from Dubai come over with all the kids. The kids have been having a blast for the last few days. And reliving our days in Dubai here in Chennai.
That's really fun. They have that frame of reference and that continuity to see their old
Right.
friends, and that's really cool.
Yeah. What about you? How was your weekend?
It was really so. We had this incredible weather phenomenon. I'm going to put this on the. This is my friend K Seattle weather. We had this incredible sunsets yesterday. It was just phenomenal,
Oh, that looks awesome.
and it's like the perfect picturesque early spring weather. You get the pink skies, and it's crisp, but it's still nice enough that you want to be outside for most of the day. It was really
Yeah.
really nice. Uh,
Nice.
the other thing that was really fun, my older kids and I were still working on our Lisp journey, so that was fun. And actually, I realized that the book itself is in the public domain by the author, so I'll put the link
Oh,
in the
cool.
description. But it's interesting. Part of me in the back of my mind says, okay, now that we have Chat GPT coming out, do we really need to learn how to program anymore?
You'll be surprised. It's the amount of code that it churns out, which is fairly efficient. I mean, to be honest, is pretty remarkable. We've been running some experiments to see if it finds a lot of bugs in the code that we've written, and it's been doing a pretty good job of that too. So yeah, you really need to start rethinking what engineers are going to do over the next decade.
Well, I guess the way I think about it is that you still need to know how it works, even if you're not in it directly. Just like most of us don't need to know how assembly language works or even how C
True.
works, but you still want to know the general data structures and algorithms, how to think algorithmically, so that when things break, you know how to, at least that you know what to expect and that you can sanity check your output.
That's right. I mean, I think knowing the fundamentals is still important, but from your day-to-day activities, I think a lot of the work that we tend to think as our primary work today is probably going to become mundane and automated to a large extent.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've seen, yeah, definitely like we did a couple of weeks ago, and I said I need a function in Python that will download all the AWS RSS feeds, parse them, and give me a word cloud. Okay, that was done, and I would have
Nice.
struggled through that for a couple of hours maybe, and that was done in a minute. And that's not definitely pretty far outside my core job description, but just being able to do that and to play with it was pretty neat.
No, that's pretty awesome.
Let's see.
Okay.
Oh, well, I wanted to we have another announcement before we jump into it. Wanted to announce the upcoming seminar.
Yep.
Here we
A
go.
webinar.
Webinar. Here we go. Pay less for AWS. I'm putting the link in the comments right now. Here we go.
Yeah. So this is a pretty neat webinar. Please come and attend. We're going to have Hilary Doyle, my co-host at AWS Insiders, and Miguel Brachini, our tech solutions head and at CloudFix. And we're going to talk about our learnings, our experiments, and our advice on how you can start saving money right away. If you've been following me on LinkedIn, I've been posting tons of tips and tricks on how to, save effectively on AWS. But this is going to be a lot more organizational as well as the regular tips and tricks. So please join us on April 6th, 10 to 11 a.m. Central Time.
So
And
9
yeah,
a.m.
we'd love to have you be there.
Seattle?
Yeah, it's 9 a.m. Seattle, is it?
Yes, please so. No, it would be 8 a.m.
8 a.m. Seattle. Great. So yeah, we would love to have you there. We will there. The link is already posted over here.
Yeah, it's in the comments.
Excellent. So looking forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, that's going to be really fun. I'm going to be attending. Looking forward to hearing about the cost saving trips. So why would you want to pay more? You could pay less. Oh, how's the audio quality? I was having audio issues last week. How is this coming through?
This is excellent.
Well,
is that Shure?
I
MV7?
followed your advice and got the Shure MV7.
Yeah, that's a pretty neat mic. Everything inbuilt, USB connectivity. It has a nice slider on the top for audio levels, and works seamlessly out of the box.
No, thank you for that. Actually, one
Anytime.
other thing that was interesting in content creator news before we dive into AWS, did you see what happened to Linus's channel?
I did.
That
They
was
got
fascinating.
hacked. If you haven't checked out the recent hack of Linus Media Group's YouTube channels, where someone hacked in and deleted literally every channel they had, and they struggled to figure out what caused it for a while. And I think they had an outage for 4 or 5 hours. It's worth watching it for the lessons.
Absolutely. So the lesson here was about session tokens.
Correct.
And so they had a logged in session, and then what ended up happening was someone phished them with a executable that looked like a PDF. And
it seemed like a contract that came from one of a potential sponsor.
Mm-hmm.
With some terms and conditions, and someone on their marketing team opened up that PDF, and that just caused huge problems for them.
Yeah, so you always have to watch the video. It's really interesting, and always be aware. So it's you'll see that my browser box here is yellow. So I use different color browsers for different Google profiles, so I can keep track of which accounts are signed in to where, so I can kind of have an idea of what might be exposed to what. And I think that Google Chrome is pretty good at isolating different Google profiles, so I see that as being useful. But if you open up a malicious executable that can then read everything that you've got, that I think that would have thwarted that. I think that macOS has a better isolation in that case than Windows, but still, it's an adversarial. And there's just a lot of scams out there, so always be careful. And we're going to be talking about anomaly detection later in the show. But yeah, always keep your guard up. One scam that I'm seeing, I don't know, Rahul, if you're seeing this, I get on LinkedIn invites to conferences that are kind of fake, but they want to say, secure your seat with a $1,000 deposit. We're so excited to have you. Make a deposit here. And there's scams about that.
Oh, so, wow. I haven't seen one of those yet, but I'm pretty sure that someone's trying to figure out how to execute the next big scam.
Yeah. So it's
always going to be the case.
Definitely stay vigilant out there. And it's sad, but we have to remember that it's adversarial out there. So stay vigilant. We'll be talking about some tools later to find anomalies, not with security, but with cost.
Great.
Oh, and then one other announcement. We just published this blog of removing unused Elastic IP addresses. So go check this out. This was a really fun blog to write, and has some good classic rock references into it, and talking about how you can reduce these Elastic IP addresses that tend to pile up. And it's one of those great things about Cloudfix is that one Elastic IP address is only 0.005 cents an hour. So what in the less than $40 a year. But and so it wouldn't make sense to devote a ton of engineering effort if you only had a handful of them. But automation can wipe that up in 1 second, get rid of it. And then at scale, it would be really hard to track these all down and get rid of them. But then automation.
Yeah, actually, within our org, we actually found something to the tune of $35,000 a year of just Elastic IPs lying around in a fraction of our AWS accounts that we ran and managed ourselves. So this just started becoming a pretty big deal. Over the years, you just have tons of these lying around that you just never turned off.
Now, what causes these to accumulate? Is it broken automation, or is it a process thing? What causes these to accumulate?
Funnily, a large number of them actually ended up in dev accounts. So developers will start EC2 instances to connect it to other resources, almost like jump boxes. And when you don't want to deal with the VPCs and connectivities, especially in smaller organizations, developers find it easy to just launch an instance and attach a public IP to it so that they can connect directly into that instance and then jump from there to wherever else they want. And in that process, when they terminate the instance, the attached Elastic IP to it continues to remain in your account as an unattached Elastic IP. So it's incredible how many of those we found just lying around. But that, at least in our experience, has been the most common scenario for when someone wants direct public access to something and doesn't want to go through a ton of the VPC hurdles. Now, this particularly happened at a time when, there was a time when AWS switched from the classic instances over to what do they call it? The VPC-based instances as the defaults, and the classic publicly available EC2 instances kind of went away. That was, I think, a period when a lot of these started getting created.
Now, we have a great comment that came up. Jeff Barr, waste pennies on unused IPs, waste dollars on unused domain names. That's
true too.
Definitely true. That's and it's funny because you always remember right after, like, oh, my AWS bill spiked this month. Oh, I guess I'm holding on to that one for another year.
Correct.
53. That's funny. Speaking of Jeff's comment there, so in this blog post, I put this reference to Steely Dan of Ricky Don't Lose That Number. It's a really catchy tune. And I remember finding that. So Jeff used to have all of his MP3s ripped to a server, and then they were on our public network, and I was browsing around. That's where I first heard that song. And I put it in this one because, Elastic IP address is like your phone number. But
yes.
Unlike back in when this song was written, your phone number might be your only connection to a person. And so you have to hold on to it. But now, now we have way too many ways to be accessed.
Yeah. Just one last comment on that particular one. The one tricky bit is there are a number of times when these public IP addresses will find their way into DNS entries. And there is no way right now that I know of where you can find out all the places where you have DNS entries for a particular IP address, almost like a reverse DNS lookup.
Now, Cloudfix will check your Route 53, but there's no way to check if some external DNS provider is using that IP address for something. Correct.
And in those particular scenarios, if you give up this IP address, so in the current scenario, if somebody accessed that particular domain, they'd probably get a 404 because it's probably pointing to nothing right now. But if that IP address gets assigned to someone else, then your domain could actually be redirecting someone to another person's application or website. So just something to watch out for.
Yeah, that does. Actually, I had a friend of mine who was receiving a bunch of traffic for a domain that was one typo off of a domain that he owned, and he ended up putting up a little website saying this is probably not where you want. He did the right thing as a good citizen and tried to alert users to the fact to the mistake that was made by the webmaster. But you can see often if you misspell a domain name, you get routed to some sketchy website that's trying to
absolutely
capture your credentials or whatnot. So I guess, like Linus, there are some adversarial actors out there, so be careful.
Absolutely.
All right, well, should we jump in to, let's see, should we do the allow listing tool?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
All right, here comes our transition. All right. So this is our allow listing tool for testing new billing, cost management, and account console permissions. Now, this is referencing a January 11th, 2023 announcement. And we actually covered this back in episode 35. So I wanted to do a quick snippet of what we talked about then to get us up to speed on what this new announcement says. So here this comes. In the announcement. Well, what do you think is the justification for it? I think one of them that they cited, they said, if you want to allow access to a specific cost management surface console page, but deny access to the bills page, you cannot do so today.
The kind of controls that they got just in the console alone weren't enough because they were either just enabling or disabling the portal. Everything else within it had no granularity of control. This change allows them to go down a level further, give very specific access and controls to specific individuals.
All right, so that was the allow listing tool that came up. This is the announcement. Oh, let me put this one back on.
Yep.
January 11th, 2023. And it gave us two new actions, this purchase orders, view purchase orders, and purchase orders, modify purchase orders under this banner of fine-grained access controls, fine-grained IAM actions for AWS billing cost management. Now, the funny thing that they announced then was that it was turning on exactly on a certain date. Now, what does this new announcement give us?
So this particular one, basically, there's an allow listing capability that gets added. And like it says in the headline here, it enables testing of these new fine-grained IAM permissions for this particular account. So if you're experimenting, you want to test out a few changes that you're making for people, you can use this new capability to test it out first, make sure that you can read all of these new listings and then deploy it.
Absolutely. So they must have received some feedback that, hey, this harsh cutover is going to be a little bit hard to deal with. And it's really neat. They listened. That's the part of that customer obsession, being able to test things out before the deadline. And I really like this idea of you can complete the migration ahead of this retirement date. So it's not this harsh one-day cutover where you have to have it exactly right on that date or things might change. So that was really neat that they were able to be accommodating.
Exactly. And I think this goes a long way in at least guiding customers on how they should test their new setups, test permissions, and then go ahead and implement it. Overall, I still think this is relatively low risk because the only parties are your finance team and your operations team, and the kind of operations are typically once a month kind of operations where you're generating POs, you're generating just making sure that your team has access to it, and it's not one of those very highly impactful system setups for your entire organization or anything like that. So it's relatively well contained, now easy to test. So yeah, you should just go ahead and test it and switch over right away. I don't see the point of waiting till July for this to affect your entire organization.
So the risk is how surly the folks down in the finance department are. So that depends on your organization.
Yeah, correct.
All right. Well, how are we going to rate this one?
I think this is good. I'd give this a 4 for a simple reason that it just makes life simpler for anyone in operations getting these changes made, and definitely simplifies.
Well, you kind of led it with that one. If it's making life simpler, yeah, let's give it a simplifies. This is great. This is really
Great.
neat. It's a good follow-on announcement to this change. So now you don't have to wait to the deadline. You just get started now. Put it into your sprint planning, or however you are planning out these transitions. Get it into the process.
Correct.
Get it tested. That's exciting.
Great.
All right. Well, let's do a quick word from CloudFix, and then we'll jump into the next one. Ro, which one do you want to do next?
Why don't we do the detective?
All right, let's do it. Okay, let's hear from CloudFix, and then we're going to do detective.
Public cloud costs going up and your AWS bill growing without the right cost controls? CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by focusing on AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe with zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. The best part? With your approval, CloudFix finds and implements AWS fixes to help you run more efficiently. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
All right, I have put the link to detective over in the comments. And then it's funny, I wanted to share another little quick reference that got me thinking. So whenever I hear detective, did you ever watch the old show Get Smart?
No, I haven't seen that show.
So it was an old black and white show, and the neatest thing about that was that the detective had a shoe phone. Let's see if I can get this to play. Oh, come on. Let's see if that might not work.
Good.
Let's see if I can try that one more time. Transition. And there we go.
This is Smart. Maxwell Smart, Agent 86. Hello, Chief. Max. What's up?
I thought that was the height of spycraft, right? This was showing, an impossible technology. And so it's pretty neat to think. And you think how inconvenient a shoe phone would be. You have to find a
Great
closet,
design.
take off your shoe. Maybe you've stepped in some gum and you've got gum in your hair. But it was such a cool idea. And so that was the classic Get Smart. So I thought detective on our list. I thought I wanted to honor that.
I've got to look this one up. This does seem pretty funny.
All right, well, let's talk about Amazon Detective. So not a shoe.
This is not the phone with not the phone in the shoe.
No, 10 terabytes.
Can we put it up? Are we in the right mode?
Oh,
no.
Here.
I think we need the right screen. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So there used to be a much lower limit to ingest data to find out the root cause of many of the security issues. So typically these would be VPC logs, CloudTrail, and other Kubernetes logs or EKS logs and so on. So what detective does for you, it basically identifies the root cause of a lot of the security problems that you might have, and it can go through the logs to understand what exactly happened and get you to understand the root cause very quickly. So now that there's more data available to identify these issues, I think it enables detective to do a much better job of looking at these attacks, especially if you have attacks that span multiple days. You want to be able to give it a lot more data to be able to find these root causes. So I think it's a good thing that it can ingest a lot more data. My only word of caution over here would be careful about giving it only the relevant pieces of data, because this can start getting pretty expensive too. Dumping all of 10 TBs of data into S3 or any other source, wherever you're dumping all these logs, and then getting them to ingest into Amazon Detective, it's all going to cost you money. So if you can try and slice down that amount of data that you're giving to Detective to what you may judge to be relevant. Don't just give it everything in the hope that you'll get all the answers.
Yes, that kid. That everything is bigger than you think it is.
Yes.
I was just looking at this data. So this is the behavior graph data that they get. That's kind of a neat visualization of where this fits in to. Okay, so the behavior graph looks at the member accounts and then exports it into this behavior graph data structure. It's really neat, right? So if it's getting CloudTrail logs, VPC flow logs, that's going to add up quickly.
Correct. And also, if you have your Kubernetes logs and guard duty, logs as well,
Okay, here we go.
all of them add up to a lot. And depending on the scale of your operations, these could be, many gigs every hour in the way these logs accumulate. So just be very careful and cautious about what you really want to send over to Detective.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was doing some research for, well, I don't want to spoil it, but an upcoming guest on Insiders, and they were talking about petabytes per day of data that they're dealing with. And so it's amazing going from shoe phone to petabytes per day of data. It's really exciting to think about how much there is, but then always remember, order of magnitudes get you. That's where
Exactly.
you think, okay, I could handle a few gigabytes per day in S3. That's only pennies. Terabytes, 1,000 gigabytes.
Exactly. One other thing that I have to go back and pull that up, but we had, I think, an article and we had a discussion about being able to remove duplicate flow logs. So usually when you do a bunch of audits, your system is going to accumulate duplicate flow logs depending on who set up the logging. And sometimes you can do them independent of each other. So you'll end up writing rules that overlap each other on what you want logged in your VPC logs. So, or in the flow logs. And I know for a fact that Cloudfix has a finder and a fixer to delete all the duplicate flow logs so that you are not burdened with such massive amounts of logs sitting and just costing you money.
Well, and similar to duplicate cloud trails, right? There could be one trail that's far larger than another trail, or one trail that's a superset of another trail. So why would you want to write them both down? And it's easy to think, okay, when everything is small, it's only a few pennies a month, but then you start up an EKS cluster and you're logging everything about it. Pennies become many, many dollars.
Agreed. Yeah, logs are something that just accumulate and, I mean, fortunately, they get rarely used, but are needed sometimes. So one of the easiest ways to be efficient with your money is to make sure that you're logging just the right stuff, you're logging them efficiently, and you're purging logs that you no longer need. I have rarely seen folks require logs to be available right then and there that are over 30 days old. So if you can, delete those logs or archive them at least. Maybe in deep glacier, so that if you ever need to audit it, you can always pull it back, but you're not paying crazy amounts of money keeping them around.
Yeah, absolutely. It's deep glacier that can be, again, that's where order of magnitudes could save you. That's a lot cheaper, and most likely, if you're pulling your logs, you're doing it for forensic purposes where there's whatever's happened has already happened and you've already plugged the leak, and now you just want to make sure that doesn't happen again. But that might not be time critical.
Agreed.
And if it really is, you could pay that little deep glacier rapid access charge.
Yeah, I mean, it's very rare that you actually encounter some of these things unless you're getting audited or there's some major event. For the most part, you almost never need to touch those logs.
Oh, well, so let's looking at this article in totality. I like this. You don't have to do anything to take advantage of this. Detective automatically scales these new limits. It gives you where to monitor it.
Yep.
This is available today for all existing and new customers in all regions, so you don't have to worry about differences there. It's looking pretty good to me on the simplifies front, but what about the clouds?
I'd give this a 4. This is relatively straightforward. One of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up is, again, just the caveat that make sure that you're logging only the necessary stuff and not everything else. It's just one of the easiest ways to save money. But Detective is a great tool to identify security issues if you're struggling with those right now, or you have audits and compliances that you need to get through and you want to make sure that all of these loopholes are plugged.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's and that's where, like you'd want to differentiate. Like I have a policy on emails. I don't delete old emails, and that's fine on a personal scale, but logs are different. Logs
Correct.
will accumulate boundlessly.
Very true.
All right.
Hey.
Well, let's go on to the next. Well, we'll have another message for CloudFix, and then let's go on to the next one where we're going to be talking about ThinkBox Deadline. Let's
do it.
Let's have a discussion about that one.
Public cloud costs going up and your AWS bill growing without the right cost controls? CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by focusing on AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe with zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. The best part? With your approval, CloudFix finds and implements AWS fixes to help you run more efficiently. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
Neat. ThinkBox Deadline 10.2. I have a funny little story. When my oldest was about maybe 2.5 or 3, and I was worried about some deadline, and he came up to me and said, "Dad, are there dead lions?" I think he was really worried that I was somehow worried about dead lions. And so, not dead lions. Luckily, we like lions. Deadlines. ThinkBox Deadline.
Yeah. So I think we should the deadline. Let's go to the deadline release notes or the deadline product. So deadline was new to me. I had not heard of it till very recently, and I assume that a lot of other AWS customers are also struggling with it. But it basically relates to management of spot instances. Now, as you know, spot instances are instances that are available, or rather not used by anybody, and they are basically available at a lower cost, a significantly lower cost, sometimes up to 90% cheaper than your on-demand instances, with the caveat that these instances can be taken away at any point of time. So they're like, there's a spot price for those instances. You bid on them, you get those instances, or you may not. And the way you kind of mitigate some of your risks around these spot instances, because you may want an X1, you may want an M6 large instance as a spot instance, but you may not get it. So you deploy what is called a spot fleet. The spot fleet can have multiple different instance types in a fleet that you can basically bid for, and it will get you whatever is available across that fleet, and it'll try to make sure that you have all the instances that you need. However, it is still problematic to manage these spot fleets and figure out how to scale it up, scale it down, manage all the capacities, or prepare for. You get a 2-minute warning when a spot instance is being taken away. Being able to manage to that and figure out when you need to, deploy an additional spot instance to possibly mitigate the risk of a instance being taken away. All of those things require a lot of behind-the-scenes work. And ThinkBox Deadline kind of helps with some of that stuff. But I think it does a lot more as well.
Now let's see how ThinkBox Deadline works. So I'm looking at this in the context of a render farm. And so I guess, is this saying, if you're using spot instances from among your render farm, and I guess inferring from the name, if you need something to be done by a certain time, this can manage your uses of spot instances so that it's
Correct.
managed for a certain it's done by a certain time.
Yeah, the primary use case also came in because a lot of customers have these time windows when a bunch of processing needs to happen. So, for example, telcos need to reconcile balances and stuff every evening. Banks need to reconcile all of their trades and stuff like that. Banks and exchanges need to reconcile all the trades before a certain deadline. I know for a fact that utilities, for example, when they generate their bills, they have to reconcile all the processing within a 24-hour window. So there are a number of use cases where there are windows within which all this processing needs to be done, and there leveraging spot instances makes a lot of sense because you need these to be as cheap as you possibly can, and you can scale them up as much as you want, and you want them for a short period of time. And these are like ephemeral instances that can come and go whenever you want. But
And
if you're running, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, these are for these embarrassingly parallel workloads, right? Where you have a workload that can be split into chunks, and then a spot instance can work on it for as long as that instance is cost effective. But then once you get that warning, the instance is closing, you can upload wherever you're at to an S3 bucket, and then the data will shut down, or the instance will shut down, and you enjoyed that low cost computation for as long as you had determined that was worthwhile. And I like
Correct.
that idea of there's some computations where it just needs to be done by tomorrow morning, but given that constraint, get it done at the lowest cost. Much like how people optimize their utility bills, right? You run your high electricity things at night because it's cheaper.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what this is, and I have yet to explore a lot more of this particular service. This was a new revelation to me. I had not heard of Deadline earlier, so I thought I'd bring this up for discussion today.
That's really neat. So this particular announcement is about spot fleets in multiple regions from the same spot event plugin. Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to really dig into this. Having looked at many of the AWS case studies where there's been large savings in AWS, spot instances has been a key part of that. With
Correct.
embarrassingly parallel workloads, right? Because on-demand is the most expensive way, but we often use the on-demand price as a reference when we're doing comparisons. But we fail to take into account that that's the upper bound. There's much ways to do it with spot, like you said, up to 90% off.
Correct.
Engineer your application, any offline computation, use spot instances. And now that think box deadlines on our radar, I think we'll both have to have a look into this so we can really know how we can use this effectively. Because the more effectively you can use spot, the more effectively you could save.
Correct. The usual trade-off that most AWS customers make is to replace their on-demand instances with a savings plan, which gets them significant discounts. But here you're explicitly making a trade-off. You are making a long-term commitment about the specific instance size, families, and stuff that you're going to be spending your money on. And to be honest, I am wary of long-term commitments like that, just to save money, because then it ties you down to the specific instance. I would much rather be a lot more flexible, where if I could, I would actually like to get off EC2 instances than get onto something like Lambda, where things are even more serverless. And it's fine to be on these EC2 instances like a transitionary phase, but not really. Like, I never think of those as my end state. So to create long-term commitments based on my current spend and my current requirements feels like an overkill and feels like not the right decision to make. So I would say, if you could architect your application to be stateless, try to leverage spot fleets so that you can get all the compute you want at a fraction of the cost. And that will also get you one step closer to getting on serverless, because being stateless is one of the critical criteria for moving to serverless.
It's interesting you mentioned the telco use case, and I'm thinking about how cell phone plans have evolved, right? It used to be you'd have 12-month or 24-month commitment, And now
Yep.
every single cell phone plan is no contract, right? It's just pay as you go month to month.
Right. Exactly.
And so I think that's the industry. Well, multiple industry trends are converging on that as being worthwhile. So I like that idea of trying to architect towards either a serverless or being happy with your usage of Spot, so that you can on average save.
Correct.
Well, how are we going to rate this one?
This is pretty detailed, though I haven't had a chance to explore it. So that's on me. But I'd give this one a 4 as well. And I will... From at the face of it, it looks like it simplifies. We will come back if, as we dig into it, we figure out that it's different.
Yeah, it looks really
I
neat.
wanted to bring it up because I think one of the big challenges that all of us have is that the sheer number of announcements that come out of AWS are just difficult to grapple with or wrap our heads around. And we're constantly discovering stuff that may have been announced in the past. We've just never gotten around to discovering it or using it. And so it's a constant challenge. And every time I come up with something new that's not mainstream, I like to bring it up in this conversation so we at least talk about it. Folks can look into it. And if they have comments about it, let us know.
Yeah, if any of you listeners are users of it, we would love to hear how it's working for you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do our last article of the day. We are going to be talking about AWS cost anomaly detection. So
I think this one is my favorite of the day.
All right, let's cue up our transition. Let's have a chat about it. All right.
That was a fancy new one.
It is. We have our cost optimization one. I wanted to have a little bit punchier music for the anomaly detection one. Always good to experiment a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. Cost anomaly detection. Let's have a look at this.
Is now automatically configured for all new Cost Explorer users. Okay. So let me just spend a minute talking about cost anomaly detection. If you follow me on LinkedIn, my post today talks about cost anomaly detection. And it's something that I really love. There are 4 different ways in which you can actually detect anomalies with this particular tool. Number 1 is you can create a rule for a service or a set of services and say, I want to detect anomalies on these particular services. The second one is that you can set it for a particular sub-account or a particular account under your master account and say, I want to look for anomalies within this account itself. The third one is that you can create cost groups based on either product or teams or whatever mechanism you have. You can create cost groups and you can configure cost anomaly detection for that cost group. And then lastly, you can set it up based on cost analysis tags. So you can create cost tags and then use anomaly detection to find anomalies against those tags. So incredibly flexible, gives you all of these different options of what kind of anomalies you want to look for. And it uses AI behind the scenes to figure out, whether there is any kind of an anomaly in the usage. And that is probably one of the simplest ways to safeguard yourself against bill shock.
We always talk. I put the URL to your LinkedIn post. I'll put it up on the screen here. Here is the cost optimization tips. There we go. So I put that there. We always talk about limiting the blast radius, right? And that's one thing that this does. We'll limit the blast radius where you're going to, if you have more than 40% of expected spend, you want to know about that sooner rather than later. And that might be a good thing. Maybe you're going viral, you're getting this great growth, but maybe one of your credentials leaked and you're mining Bitcoin and you don't know about it.
Correct.
So you want to separate those two cases.
Exactly. And, in other cases, like if you're regularly, on a daily basis, you're spending $100 on a particular service, suddenly it floats up to $200 or $400 or whatever else. You want to know about it right there. You don't want to know about it at the end of the month when you get the bill. So the faster you catch it, the faster you detect it, and the faster you can nip the problem at its butt, you basically can, get to managing a more sane operational execution.
This is really exciting, and they had mentioned this in the Cloud Ops conference. They're quite excited about this anomaly detection. This is something that was, I think, requested quite a bit. So it's really good
Yes.
that this is now in production. And I like this because you get it automatically.
Exactly.
You don't have to opt into it or set up some machine learning rules or they didn't make it overly complicated. It's just
if you go into the console and try this out, it is super simple. It's literally a four radio buttons for the 4 categories that I talked about, and you just give it the value of the account or the cost tag or the group or the service, and you're all set. It's that simple.
And actually, I wanted to highlight it's when you look at this, you say, "Oh, great, over $100 and exceeds 40% of expected spend." It's so easy when you're on the other side of it, when you're designing the system, to have, well, maybe I want the second derivative of the cost trajectory, and you could go wild with this complexity, and to really boil it down to basically slope and intercept,
Correct.
2 rules that you could write down on a napkin. That's one of the really hard things in software design. So kudos to them for not over complexifying this, because once it becomes too complicated, then your alerts stop mattering because you get a lot of false positives. So this is a really simple one that you definitely want to pay attention to, and then you could drill down into it. Yeah, no, I'm very happy with the design team for not making this, I don't know, some Lambda function that can then you have to implement yourself to tell you if your spend is high or not. It would lead to problems that it would solve.
Correct. I completely agree with that. This definitely deserves a simplified tag, and it's the blog post is so simple. I'll give it a 4 for sure.
There's our simplifies and 4 clouds.
I think today we've been at 4. We have had little to no variance.
No, I think it was straight 4s across the board. So good work, AWS.
I agree.
This was a good set of announcements. Well, this was a really fun show. I think that's all we have for today. But what's coming up in the next couple of days? We have, next week's episode, we will be talking about DevOps Guru. I think you can see that. We got DevOps Guru. We've got Jonathan Vogel and Raluca Constantine. We're excited to have those. That might be an offline discussion, so I'll put up a post to collect any questions that you may have as an audience for us to ask them. I'll have that up in the next day or so. Rahul, what's your week look like?
A very, very busy week with a lot of pre-work going on for the new season of AWS Insiders that's launching on, I think, April 16th is the tentative date, but we'll be making an announcement very soon about that. So there's a lot of work going on that. And of course, the webinar that we just spoke about a short while ago, we are prepping really hard to make sure that we have the most valuable content for you so that you can, get started on your cost savings journey on AWS. And I'm looking forward to the live stream next week with the DevOps Guru team, and looking forward to bringing you more content. So if you guys have any questions, suggestions, please let us know. We want to make sure that this content is most relevant to what you really want to hear.
Absolutely. And please continue to like and subscribe if you haven't already. We really appreciate your support. We're working on a revamp of the website to consolidate some of the AWS Made Easy content, and also talk about CloudFix and how that can help automatically implement all of these cost optimization strategies that we've been talking about. So that's really exciting. It's been really fun. I've been working a lot on the Fixer blog series lately, and that's been really neat to just dig into the details of how you could distill all of this complexity into these fairly straightforward rules that could then be applied to accounts en masse and save a huge amount of cost. They could then be freed up to do other things.
Completely agree.
All right.
Hey, that's all we have for the show today. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next week.
All right. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Is your AWS public cloud bill growing? While most solutions focus on visibility, CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by finding and implementing AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe. There's zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. We've helped organizations save millions of dollars across tens of thousands of AWS instances. Interested in seeing how much money you can save? Visit cloudfix.com to schedule a free assessment and see your yearly savings.